Okay.
高橋さん、
Done.
見える？
はい。
Oh, yeah. Of course.
OK。
OK。
No, it just says medium. Oh, okay. This is good.
They're attacks by Islamist militant groups. Some claim to be branches of the Islamic State, while others claim to be Al-Qaeda. Both groups are usually associated with the Middle East, but for the past decade, Islamist militant groups have been spreading across Africa, where they've continued to find places to organize and launch attacks.
Right, but actually Al-Qaeda is supported by...
No, different organization.
Yeah, it's a different organization. But this is a Sunni organization. Al-Qaeda is
Same Sunni.
same, also Sunni.
Their success has pushed these fragile states into deeper turmoil, and it's made the region one of the most dangerous in the world. To understand how these terrorist groups got to Africa and why they're so successful there, it helps to start in Nigeria. Nigeria has the biggest population and economy in Africa. Wealth industry and major cities are mostly in the south, while the north is poor, marginalized, isolated, and home to most of Nigeria's Muslim population. It was here that a radical Islamist group called Boko Haram took shape and turned violent in 2009. They started razing villages, slaughtered men and women, and kidnapped children who were forced to carry out suicide attacks. The Nigerian government cracked down, but the group continued to grow. In 2014, they got international attention when they kidnapped close to 300 schoolgirls in Chibok. By then, they controlled a huge swath of territory in northern Nigeria, where they imposed strict Sharia law and declared it an Islamic caliphate. In 2015, they became affiliated with the Islamic State, which had a caliphate of its own in Iraq and Syria. Within a few years, the group killed nearly 25,000 people and was on track to become the deadliest terror group in the world, eventually surpassing ISIS. 5 African countries backed by the US, UK, and France formed a task force to battle Boko Haram.
So more
By April 2015,
members
they
than ISIS.
liberated major towns and seemed to push Boko Haram out. But 3 years later, Boko Haram is still active. The group has shifted its focus to the Lake Chad region, one of the poorest places in the world. The lake touches the borders of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, but none of the state governments have any real presence here. This is where Boko Haram is operating. They've been raiding local villages for food and capturing men to serve as fighters. In 2016, the group split into two. As Boko Haram's attacks grew more and more violent, this group, the Islamic State West Africa, started offering protection to villages in danger. They also provided stability and even water supplies to a region collapsing under a food crisis in exchange for attacks and recruits. In the absence of a strong central government, they've moved further into Nigeria and Niger, where they've launched attacks of their own and are officially affiliated with the Islamic State. Exploiting and terrorizing locals in ungoverned areas has become a successful strategy, keeping these militant groups active, but it doesn't stop here. The strategy is being used by terrorists all across the continent.
Actually, I listened to a podcast this week about Boko Haram and how they kidnapped these girls, right?
Yeah.
So these girls have been liberated, but actually quite a few of them were married with these Boko Haram fighters.
Wow.
And actually Boko Haram is not, these fighters are not especially only loyal to Boko Haram. They are branching out into different organizations. But after these girls have been rescued, many of them want to go back. They want to go back because that the whole area is so insecure, is so unsafe, and there are so many conflicts there.
The Boko Haram area is very safe.
Boko Haram area is safer for them.
Wow.
So they have a better future. Plus, a lot of these girls actually are not negative about these ideas of Islam. They come from an Islamic area. So the situation there, it's not only like a Boko Haram is a bad, and they are terrorizing the area. They also bring law and order, and they bring stability where governments are failing, and they bring stability in those regions. So it's very weird that actually these kinds of terrorist organizations that we always think like, oh, they're creating instability. For the local people who have never been governed properly by the states, they bring safety, and they attract actually more people to move into these areas. So that also will create certain points of gravity that will bring actually more power and more wealth to these terrorist organizations. So it seems to me that actually there's a rather bright future for these terrorist organizations, because governments are failing them.
Exactly right. Buhari, he cannot manage well, especially northern part of Nigeria.
But if you look in the southern part, that is the one of the richest areas.
A different country.
Right, it's a different country, but it shares the same borderlines. So the southern part is blossoming, and the economic growth is going up. There is a small but definitely rich elite that could take the country and bring it into a much better economic state. But at the same time, in the northern part, they're completely failing them.
But we must be careful. Westerners say completely failing. But just you said, actually Boko Haram or ISIS is sub-Saharan areas. Those people are dominant. They said ungoverned, but who govern?
Yeah, well, okay, so it's governed by but it's governed by them because the state did not govern them properly, because people don't feel safe in those areas, because actually the control over the army from the southern coastal area is very limited. So there's very little oversight over what's happening, and a lot of people feel very insecure. Theft and rape and all these things, those are serious risks that a lot of these people in those areas are confronted with. Actually, it was also said in that podcast that women got much better education under Boko Haram than they got under the state-sponsored program. So that's what also attracted a lot of women to go back to that area.
Yeah.
How do you do?
Edo-san, who provided them with weapons to the Boko Haram or ISIS?
Oh, Libya.
Libya.
There, Gaddafi had a lot of weapons. So those weapons spread all Africa.
Wow.
Still, they have lots of weapons. Yeah.
Right, and of course, IS is also being sponsored, right?
No.
Sponsor, they actually they escaped from Middle East to Sub-Saharan area. Right. Also,
right.
Libya, they have one of
Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is I think it's quite safe to assume that Saudi Arabia is sponsoring Al Qaeda.
No. Not now.
So who's sponsoring Al Qaeda? They're sponsoring themselves. They're self-financed.
Yeah, self-financed. Not officially, but America is not officially their sponsor, but they a lot of things is Middle East. Weapon, they try to provide a lot of weapon to the Syrian anti-government militants, but actually many weapon is occupied by ISIS. So it means, I don't know, America intentionally do that, not intentionally, but who knows. So this area is very difficult to make judgment. Who's right, who's doing that.
Right. I mean, that's the same thing. It's very difficult to make an objective image. Like at certain points in time, for example, a different organization, Muslim Brotherhood, was viewed very positively, and in other times now Muslim Brotherhood is this radical organization that's destabilizing
Yeah,
the region.
right, yeah. Who's right? Nobody knows. And also, several years ago, 250 girls kidnapped. It's just those Al Qaeda were so bad people, but just you said,
Hmm.
no.
Actually, those girls want to, well, not all of them, but there's quite a few
yeah,
girls who just want to go back because they feel safer there. They get better education
yeah,
there.
I understand.
There's food there.
Understand. This is a very important issue.
Hmm.
And if you're going to read American newspaper, New York Times, and or some famous news, but those are some cases very fake.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
To tell the truth, they're happy living there,
Right.
especially Lake Chad.
Hmm.
Nobody controls those areas.
Right.
Right? This
Right.
is Nigeria
super
government,
poor, that's it.
many other Chad, some country they can't manage it. Actually, those areas, the local insurgent they're dominant those areas.
But it's also, it gives us a very good idea how we can, if governments, if states really want to control, want to keep control over their country, then the remedy seems to be to actually start providing people with real opportunities to live safe, to give them proper education, and give them food and stability. Then they will not become members of terrorist organizations.
But in some future, okay, several years later, Nigeria get more money. They try to occupy those areas, like same as Middle East, ISIS by Syria or Iraq. They're going to eliminate those people. But now they are poor. Mali and Chad,
Yeah.
Niger, they don't have money.
Well, Chad doesn't have a lot of things going for it. I mean, the country is landlocked. It's covered by basically a huge desert in the north. In the south, there is this impenetrable forest, and there's a lot of instability around them. They have nothing. I don't know how Chad would ever make a living. There's no proper infrastructure. It's basically, how would these people make money?
Exactly. So you said rape, but not those of kind of insurgency or not militant. They are trying to doing rape everywhere, right? So just robbing, raping everywhere in those areas.
But yeah, it's a way to suppress and control and to terrorize and to now we have the situation in not here but a little bit further west in Khartoum with the protest going on.
Which country?
Khartoum in Khartoum is the capital of Somalia. No, it's not Somalia.
South Sudan.
Sudan.
Yeah.
Sudan. Not South Sudan, but Sudan.
Sudan.
Sudan. The Al Jawid. There used to be there is a where was it in not Dakar in the terrible area. This is a region within Sudan Darfur.
Darfur.
That's a lot a lot of crimes against humanity, and the culprit was the Al Jawid. But Al Jawid was actually sponsored by the government, who were supporting them, giving them weapons in order to control that region.
So this is not only Africa, but those cases Darfur is very difficult to judge who's wrong, who's right.
Right. But actually, so what happened is that now in Darfur.
I agree with you. Just before you told me which country is this? Forget that. Many people killed, 1 million people killed, and this is actually Rwanda. Actually happened. Okay, and Kigali,
yeah.
just save that country, but this is a kind of true story, but many cases we don't know who's right, who's wrong. Right?
Right. It's not so black and white.
Exactly.
And
so
if you look at it, depends on from which perspective you look.
exactly.
And how did this situation come about?
Yeah, currently you said this is ungoverned area, right? And they try to control by themselves, like Al Qaeda, ISIS, but we don't know next 3 years
Right.
what's going on. But
And I think a lot of people there who are members of these terrorist organizations, I don't believe that they are so much into have this big geopolitical agenda. They are just trying to bring peace and stability for their families and for themselves in order to survive and in order to make sure that somebody else is not filling that.
Exactly, this is very important. Every time I just studied for past 2 years, I studied 100 countries. What is the fundamental, basic fundamental they concern is family. Okay, and the political unrest or some kind of problems, any country basic is family, right?
Yeah.
So this country is democratic country, this kind of authoritarian whatsoever, but you need to watching what their family is happy or not.
Right.
This is most concerned, right? So this is I understand for that aspect. So former Chinese, philosopher said, your fundamental is how to protect your family first, then protect your area, protect your country, and most basic fundamental is family. All Chinese people. It's this warring period. It's 2,500 years ago. Exactly right thing they said before. Now it's the same, right? Basic is family. So those people is why they allow them to invade those areas, because those areas is exactly not stable.
Right.
Robbers and nobody is city mayors, bribes.
Right, and there are some people who can sell some arms and
Yeah.
in order for people to protect themselves.
Yeah. So that's a big reason why those people come here.
So basically, in these countries, they fail the people. They fail the people to bring them stability, to bring them proper education, to bring them proper health care.
Maybe do you know whether you are not Islamic education is very strict
Yeah.
rather than Christianity.
Right.
Very strict. So the education very very good. Islamist. But Islamist people is we cannot doing well. Or democratic people, no, they can't do that. Do well. So this is a problem. But those people, Sunni, and also the fundamentalists, not easy to cooperate with them.
Right.
No, don't drink liquor. Very religious, very strict. It's not easy.
Well, but this kind of strictness is a little bit different if you go into Africa. So if you look at the Islam within Africa, it's very different from what you experience if you go to the Middle East. It's still Africa, That people have a kind of different culture. There's layers. So you have the African culture, and you have the layer on top of that is their religion.
Of course,
The attitude of Muslims in Africa is very different from the attitude of Muslims in the Middle East. They are much more relaxed about their.
In Africa?
Yeah.
Might be. My experience only half century ago to North Africa.
You've been there?
Yeah. Hitchhiking.
Ah. Where? Which area?
North Africa, like
Morocco?
Tunisia, Morocco, and those countries.
I've been to Tunisia. I've never been to Morocco.
I stayed in Kasbah.
Kashba.
No money.
Oh, right.
Those people very very kind to take care of me. At that time I was so young. I don't have any fear or threat. But
you have nothing to lose,
Nothing to lose. So
Exactly, so that's- I
everybody
know that
take
feeling.
very kind. Local people very kind.
Right.
So
Right. I mean, I believe that the poorer people become, the easier it is for them to share what they have.
yeah, poor people is very kind
Yeah.
rather than European people.
Right. Because basically, they take a distance because they're afraid that you might take something from them. Whereas poor people, they know what it is like to be without money, to be
Like
without
they
food.
invited their house,
Yeah.
but very poor.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, the same experience.
I know that, but also those people culture, not so big difference as time goes by.
Mm.
Culture,
Right. You could interpret that in many different ways.
That's why.
Right.
So this one is I understand what you said.
Right. Okay.
Chad is part of the Sahel, a narrow band of territory that stretches across North Central Africa. The conditions that make Lake Chad ideal for Boko Haram and ISWA extend across this whole region. The population is mostly Muslim and vulnerable. Ethnic conflicts are rampant, food is scarce, poverty is rife, and most importantly, there's almost no presence of a government. Islamist militant groups have been filling these spaces at a staggering pace. 7 years ago, Islamist militant groups took over northern Mali and declared it a caliphate for 10 months, before a French military intervention drove them back into the desert. Today they've banded together and are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. A group called ISGS broke away and is now affiliated with the Islamic State. This part of Mali remains ungoverned and violent 7 years after the intervention. Both of these groups are fighting for various militias in the conflict. Meanwhile, both are attacking foreigners, including the French embassy in 2018 and the 2017 ambush of the U.S. Special Forces in Niger.
Fox News is learning that 12 U.S. soldiers, mostly Green Berets, were ambushed by a larger force of ISIS-linked militants.
Islamist militant groups are finding success in other ungoverned spaces as well. ISIS claims to have launched 10 attacks in 2018 in Libya, where a civil war has raged since 2011. In Somalia, an ISIS-affiliated group split from Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda group. It's made this whole part of Africa one of the most dangerous places in the world. The US and France have both stepped up their presence with several military bases across the Sahel. But drone strikes and special forces alone are not the solution to the Islamist terrorism in Africa. As long as there are places with poverty, conflicts, and no government, terrorist groups will be here.
Like just Somalia, Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is the same environment like Lake Chad. And Al-Shabaab, they dominate many areas of that area.
Right.
But Al-Shabaab,
They bring some kind of stability.
exactly.
No matter what.
Exactly.
Because there is nothing. It's a completely failed state. There's
That's right.
nothing there. So.
But
well,
actually, the Al-Shabaab dominate that country,
right.
and they organize community,
Hmm.
and they try to provide food.
But the problem is that there is also people there who don't want to support Al-Shabaab, but there's no space for these people. So how are you going to deal? How are you going to protect people who are suffering under these? Because how are the groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS? How are they going to bring food and prosperity to their families?
This is a problem. Okay?
Only because they suppress the farmers in that area, because they're not farming, they're getting their food from somewhere
Yeah,
else.
this is a problem. This is the same as ISIS in Middle East.
So this is a vicious circle that is
Exactly.
not going to stop unless you bring prosperity
Exactly.
to that area, to that
Exactly.
region. But
That's kind of, okay, I tell you, who is right, who is wrong, nobody knows. This is a true story, and Al-Shabaab in those areas, but I don't know how many years they can sustain current situation is, right?
until Somalia becomes richer, until there is some kind of
That's right. Somalia get richer, and
But how can it get richer if basically everybody is depending on theft and warfare to make money, to make a living?
Like this morning I studied Chinese history, Same, just 2,500 years ago they had a war everywhere because shortage of food. Now is they're going to get already developing country and developed area, their food is sufficient, they stop war.
Right.
And insufficient food, good, they're going to start war. Right?
Yeah.
Same.
Right, insufficient war, insufficient food, and that's going to happen in more regions, especially in the future with climate change.
Climate change is recently. Do you know what's happening in Europe now?
Yeah, it's a record left and right. There's a record heat wave.
46
going.
degrees
Yeah,
in France.
yeah,
46 degrees.
yeah. That's ridiculous.
My wife told me.
I never experienced that. But 46 I didn't hear, but a very hot record.
46
hot.
degrees is Sahara desert. Many people cannot survive.
Yeah, many people die. I remember 2006, 2005 or 2006. It was a heat wave in Europe, and I think it was estimated about 25,000 people, mostly elderly people, have died because of it.
Oh, you had experience before,
Yeah.
not the first time.
Right, but I don't know if it was as bad as it is now, but it was a very long period of heat, very long period. But it's people who are weak and who are not used to the heat, who are old and sick. It can just push them over the top.
I can't believe it. In Tokyo, 46 degrees. No.
Well, it's a different kind of heat. It's not the same.
Not the same.
It's not the same.
You mean dry?
It's dry, much drier.
Yes.
Yeah. In France, the heat is much drier. Right, still, 46 is bloody hot, of course. There's no doubt about it. But it's more comfortable than in the Tokyo heat. I think if Tokyo is 32, 33,
But Tokyo is going up to 46. Nobody cannot go outside.
No.
32, 29, 30s. My wife don't want to go outside.
Your wife doesn't want to go outside anyway. Does she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wilson, to keep the many soldiers, it takes maybe a huge budget. Where that budget come from? From the oil money?
You mean soldiers?
Yes.
I see. Yes?
I said, but ISIS gets the money from the oil, isn't it?
Middle East, right?
Middle East.
But Saharan, those people, I don't know how they
Via
do-
Turkey, yeah?
Turkey.
How do that's
Turkey
right.
laundering the oil.
No. Erdogan's son dealing oil business there, so they are selling to the ISIL. But I don't know how. But this is maybe okay. Libya's ISIL, Al Qaeda. They got the money selling oil, understandable. But Saharan Al Qaeda, Saharan ISIS, I don't know how they're going to get money. I don't know. Nigeria's
It's very strange.
how they're going to survive. They maybe they try to get money from farmer, maybe farmer. Otherwise, no money sources to get. They try to. But I can guess because mayor of local city, those they have very dirty and bribes. So that's the reason they people accept insurgent, militant people embedded there because that's the reason they're going to take care of those people. And instead, dirty mayors they collect money from farmers. Probably they got money from them, but not rich, very poor. Both parties, both very poor. They have no source to get money from anywhere. Nigeria have oil, but not northern area, southern area.
Yes. Yeah.
So, So only get from land. Agricultural product, and they are eating those products. They survive. They are not rich. But weapon is get from Libya. Libya is lots of weapons spread all
Have
over
been
Africa.
supplied by different sides that have been supplying weapons to Libya. It's U.S. Probably U.S. also supply weapons there for the.
No, not anymore.
What? How was it when?
No, not anymore. Before Middle East in the war, they provide a lot of weaponry for the anti-government of Syria, but not anymore. So Africa is not easy. It is easy to tell. They have no statistics,
Yeah.
and we can very difficult to get the current.
No, they don't. I tried to write my thesis about Africa, but seriously, I gave up on it.
Okay.
After going through, I mean, this is like a long time ago, the previous century, but
Previous century.
I have been going through libraries and trying to find data in our university, but no data.
No.
Exactly. So I'm writing book, okay, on 100 countries, and Africa case only South Africa, or some Botswana, some only rich country, they have statistics.
Yes.
And any other, they tell the statistics, but just that they got information 2004 or 2005. It is almost lie. No statistics. So it means tell the truth. AIDS, HIV, how many people the HIV virus they have, but nobody knows. Only South Africa, Botswana, and several countries they have figures, but usually any other like Nigeria or Mali, it's impossible to get those figures. And also,
But looking at the countries around it, it's likely that it's not as rampant as it is in southern Africa.
Everybody HIV. Don't touch them. And many people don't worry about going to those areas, but I don't believe it, because no statistics, no information. Of course, just the bird flu, and spread like a pig disease. This is obviously they understand. Many pig dead, right? So that caused problem in Africa. So this.
What's the other one? The Ebola.
Oh, Ebola
is now getting a problem.
Good example. This is
no, that Ebola is dismissed.
No, actually Ebola is no longer contained within Congo. So it's people fly. Actually, they're getting out of Congo into Uganda, and now it's getting into Uganda, which is problematic. And now they want to send those people back, but they cannot always, because there's a lot of like cross-border marriages and kids who are actually both from have dual passports. So this could actually easily spread out to Congo, and then it's going to be even harder to contain.
Actually, very difficult to recognize, border of those Saharan countries,
Right.
especially
In Sahara countries, but between Congo and there's a clear border actually. There is really a border that you cannot so easily cross.
Huh?
Yeah. Well, that's also because Congo and Uganda are not especially fan of each other.
What?
They're not especially fans of each other. They don't like each other that much.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
That also has an ethnic background.
Oh, this is ethnic background, understandable. Yeah.
So I think that this is an economic problem. Islam is militant group. It's an economic problem. I don't think there is any solution. Like you saw in the video, there's Western intervention. They're trying to take control to protect the farmers who are being suppressed by these Islamist militant groups, but actually they just retreat in the desert. They wait till the western part loses Western intervention groups lose interest, and then they take back control, and they will get followers, because actually in that no man's land, it's very unsafe for the people who live there. Very unsafe. Especially because a lot of these intervention forces in Africa are led by Nigeria, because it's the most powerful, economically powerful country, and they are very difficult to control. There are a lot of reports from Nigerian soldiers who are abusing local women. So it's this is basically, I don't know whether local citizens are so much better off being controlled by their own governments compared to being controlled by these Islamist militant groups.
It's kind of many areas, just like you said, anarchy. But you said soldiers rape women, but which soldiers? It's very difficult to make judgment.
Right.
Right? But
Right.
We don't know which country.
Right, but I mean, it's always. I mean, it is, especially in a period of transition. So if there is the power is being grabbed by one group versus the other group, it's usually the citizens that suffer the most in those periods. So by the time stability comes, it's more or less the risk decreases. But so it is obvious choice for people to say, okay, well, if I have to choose, then the best, that's probably
Who is coming?
Amazon.
Amazon.
That's right.
Uno-san.
More without any failure. Always Amazon is the only one who calls it. Would you like a peanut?
Peanut. Thank you. Nelson, how about the smell of the air in this room?
Good. Actually, I feel I feel better. I mean, usually I always get pain in my throat, and then my eyes start to get
Today you have no problem.
better.
Better. Okay. Uno-san, never change the filter.
You know.
Yeah. Ask to Uno-san, have you ever changed the filter? No. Oh my god. That sounds very bad.
So you're actually circulating this air here, and this terrible.
Uno-san sometimes clean the filter by using the cleaner, electric cleaner. But I think that's not good.
Well, a little bit.
That's Jacob.
What?
How about you use Jacob?
I don't know, they're going to check in 20
Jacob?
Jacob is a CATV.
Oh.
Jacob is a CATV.
CATV, they're going to come here.
They're using a CATV. They provide internet.
You need it?
They come here 30 minutes, but I don't know what objective they want.
What are they going to do here?
No, I don't know.
More, you don't know.
No, just sales.
I don't care. They want to come, okay? Why not?
寂しいの?
So, not 寂しい.
Is he a salesperson?
No, I don't know.
Obviously.
Who are they? They wanted to come, okay, why not? Why they come here?
If you're not interested in buying anything, I think then you could both save yourselves the time and effort.
So Africa is a very interesting area, so it's very difficult judgment which one is go well or not. Right? But very interesting is China still making a lot of money investing in Africa.
Right.
And also that
Yeah, but they're not investing here, ne?
Hmm?
They are not investing in these areas.
No. They try, of course, they try to invest in money for more stable or safe area. And also Japan decided to make investment.
That's the next video, by the way.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Escape.
Okay. Move him.
Here we go.
China's China.
How Africa is becoming China's China.
This video was made possible by Brilliant. Start learning with Brilliant for 20% off by being one of the first 200 to sign
It
up
starts
at
a little slow, but
brilliant.org/Wendover.
okay. Bear with me.
Political
First few
alliances manifest themselves here, on the voting floor of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, New York. In this room, countries impose legislation that carries weight worldwide, and so what happens in this room is the physical materialization of the world's politics. 47 years ago, exactly that happened when one of the General Assembly's most consequential votes occurred. China, you see, essentially has two governments. There's the Republic of China, which used to control the mainland and Taiwan, but today only administers Taiwan, and there's the People's Republic of China, which controls the mainland. Both claim to be the rightful governments of all of the Chinese territory, both Taiwan and the mainland, and so back in 1971, the United Nations had to decide which government would represent China. Essentially, the question was which government was the rightful leader of the territory, as there could only be one in the United Nations. The US was the main superpower opposing the People's Republic representing China, as it had a strong political and military alliance with the Republic of China government, and so the vote was essentially the US's sphere of influence versus the world. Among the 35 countries that voted against the People's Republic were much of Africa, the Central African Republic, Chad, Gabon, Liberia, Niger, South Africa, and plenty of others that sided with the US. Despite the US's effort, the resolution ended up passing, and the representative government for China in the UN was switched to the People's Republic of China. But what's interesting about this vote is not the result, it's who voted against the People's Republic. Since that 1971 vote, you see, something has changed. In 2007, the UN General Assembly met once again to vote on whether to adopt a resolution condemning the human rights situation in North Korea. As one of North Korea's strongest allies, this vote was China and its sphere of influence versus the world. In this vote, though, only Burundi, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Liberia, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritania, and Tanzania voted against China. All the 43 other African countries either abstained or voted no along with China, because in the 40 years between these votes, political ties changed. Africa no longer bows to the US. Much of the continent is now economically and politically aligned with the world's fastest emerging superpower, China. The simple answer for why this is because China has pumped huge amounts of money into the continent of Africa. They're buying allies. For example, China built a $3.2 billion railway in Kenya trekking the 300 miles from Nairobi, the capital, to Mombasa, the second largest city and primary port, in 4 hours and 30 minutes. That's faster than what the fastest train in the US, the Acela Express, takes to travel the equivalent distance from Philadelphia to Boston. China also built a $526 million dam in Guinea, which helped push the country from having constant power shortages to making more energy than it needs and selling the extra capacity to its neighbors. China also built a $475 million light rail system in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, designed as a way to combat the capital's crippling traffic. These are only a sampling. There are literally hundreds of others of Chinese infrastructure projects in Africa each year. All across the continent, China is playing a part in projects both big and small that are transforming African economies. It's important to note that these projects are not, though, free. Each of these three were financed by loans granted by China's state-owned and controlled Export-Import Bank, and these loans do, of course, need to be paid back by the countries granted them.
Large African infrastructure projects, though, would be viewed as risky by any traditional bank and would therefore struggle to get financed, but China's Export-Import Bank doesn't care. Assuming cooperation between the Chinese and African countries' governments, this bank will give low-interest or no-interest loans to African countries so they can build these trains or dams or other projects. These loans are therefore considered a form of foreign aid since China doesn't expect to get all their money back, at least adjusted for inflation, since they're not charging much interest and there's a high risk of default. Of course, China isn't just financing these projects out of kindness. For each of them, there's a political goal behind it. You see, the country of China is running out of growth potential. Its era of double-digit year-over-year GDP growth is over as it makes the shift from industrializing to industrialized. Africa, meanwhile, is one of the least developed areas of the world, and a lack of development actually makes fast growth easy. The first step of economic development for many countries is natural resource exploitation. Nearly every country has some level of natural resources that can be used to kickstart growth, but first they need to have enough money to build the infrastructure and take the steps needed to gather these natural resources. As everyone knows, it takes money to make money, and China has money. By investing in African mining and farming, China can profit off Africa's growth and fuel the business back in China that requires minerals and food. But in addition to serving as a source of natural resources, Africa has another resource: labor. It might seem strange that China, the country that the world uses for low-cost manufacturing, is looking for a labor source elsewhere, but that is exactly what it's doing. China is a victim of its own success. The economic development that its manufacturing industry brought pushed a large segment of its population into the middle class, which raised labor costs countrywide. It's not bad news. China as a country has shifted from having a low-skilled to a medium-skilled workforce as their education level has improved, but for the lowest cost, lowest skilled manufacturing work, the country of China is no longer competitive. Therefore, Chinese manufacturing firms are setting up their own operations in Africa, one of the cheapest and lowest skilled labor markets in the world. Today, China is now the largest trading partner with Africa as a whole. Despite China being a vastly larger country than the US in population, the US and China both trade a similar value of goods worldwide each year. In this case, though, whereas $48 billion worth of goods were exchanged between the US and Africa in 2016, China traded $128 billion worth of goods, nearly 3 times as much. Now, the whole idea of setting up a structure of power over other less developed states in order to gather resources. In this case, though, whereas 40 lowest skilled labor markets in the world. Today, China is now the largest trading partner with Africa as a whole. Despite China being a vastly larger country than the US in population, the US and China both trade a similar value of goods worldwide each year. In this case,
their export-import volume put together, global trade, the same amount. See, it's the same amount.
Yeah, but I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
No.
Why not?
US 10 times.
What?
Trade. Same trade?
Of course, the composition is different because US has a trade deficit, whereas China has a trade surplus. Actually, does China still have a trade surplus? Yeah, I think they do.
China export to US a lot of money. America.
Not with each other, global entirely.
Yeah, I know. But the US export import $3.88 trillion. Same amount. Okay. I can't feel that.
You want to wiki it?
No, I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
Whereas $48 billion worth of goods were exchanged between the US and Africa in 2016, China traded $128 billion worth of goods, nearly 3 times as much. Now, the whole idea of setting up a structure of power over other less developed states in order to gather resources and use their labor force might sound familiar, because that's largely what colonialism was. The motives behind European powers expanding their territory to less developed nations in the 15th through 20th centuries were remarkably similar to the motivations between China's growing economic influence in the developing world today. Despite what some may say, there is empirical evidence that China has been using these infrastructure investments to affect worldwide politics. It's been found that if an African country recognizes Taiwan as a country, they receive, on average, 2.7 fewer Chinese infrastructure projects within their borders each year. Conversely, if a
20% fewer Chinese infrastructure.
So if you vote against China, you are almost 3 times less likely to receive financing from China.
What does this mean, 2.7?
So countries who are voting with China are much more likely to get China's financing.
Lots of materials here. I don't. Okay. I don't understand. What the 2.7 fewer?
So 2.7 times fewer chance of getting financing from China. So if African countries vote with Vietnam or with Taiwan, if they are not aligned with China politically, then they are much less likely to receive financing for the infrastructural projects. But this is a little bit, these numbers are a little bit skewed, because I don't think it takes into account who was already receiving money. So it's not like you will be punished, but it's logically, if there is an economic relationship between two countries, they're more likely to support each other because there is an interest. I mean, you see that everywhere. We have the European Song Contest, and obviously countries who are friendly with each other politically, they much more easy to vote for their representative during the contest. So that's logical. Basically, what they are saying, their argument is that by investing in these countries, they are actually expanding their influence within the UN. One country, one vote, no? One country, one vote, and Africa has a lot of countries. 54, I believe. 54?
Yeah, 54, 5, yes.
So 54 countries, and China is investing in a lot of them. They are investing much more in Africa than the US is, almost 3 times as much as the US is. They have more risks, but they get political influence. Plus, they get economic influence. They can tap into the natural resources and the potential of labor. And infrastructure will help them to capture the value that they will generate in the future in Africa, and get that product out of Africa into China.
What does it mean, fewer? Compared with what?
Fewer investments.
China has fewer investment?
If you vote against China, it's much less likely that you will get funding or investment from China, which is logical, of course. If you're against me in the UN, if you vote against me, against my interest, then there will be less tendency for China to support your economy or economic development or invest in your country. You see that very easily. I mean, China is also, for example, tourism. There are a lot of Chinese, and when they go overseas, they spend a lot of money. So what happened is, I don't know, where was it? Korea? I think Korea was creating a conflict, and then the Chinese discouraged their citizens to go to Korea. And at the same time, there was some kind of like a new relationship with Taiwan, so they promoted, not Taiwan, of course not Taiwan, Thailand. And now the overwhelming majority of Chinese tourists are going to Thailand. So people are following very closely what the state wants.
Why Chinese infrastructure policy get fewer?
In countries that do not vote with them in the UN.
Okay.
That's the point.
Okay.
American country votes overwhelmingly along with China in the United Nations General Assembly, they receive 1.8 more infrastructure projects each year. Considering that the General Assembly is an equal representative body where each country gets one vote no matter if they have 1 million residents or 1 billion, China is getting a lot of influence for, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of money. China touts the fact that their foreign investment and aid is no strings attached. Unlike other institutions that give low or no interest loans to developing countries like the International Monetary Fund or World Bank, China gives loans with no requirements on factors like respect of human rights or democratic elections. Of course, this data linking infrastructure investment with political leanings shows that there are indeed hidden strings that require benefit for China rather than benefit for the receiving country. Western powers are understandably concerned about this shift in power dynamics towards a country with vastly different ideals. In 2017, China entered a select club as it opened a military base in Djibouti. While 4 other countries have bases in Djibouti, France, Italy, Japan, and the US, this base was unique as it was China's first base abroad, and those by themselves, military bases abroad, are unique. Only 15 of the world's most developed and militarily powerful countries worldwide have them, and now China is one of them. Although Western powers might be worried for the wrong reasons. The government of China is clearly putting a lot of focus and money into Africa, but not as much as you'd think based off the result they're getting: vast amounts of influence over a whole continent. There are 2 key numbers to look at. In 2015, China loaned just $12 billion to African countries. In the same year, the country invested a mere $3 billion into the continent. That's just not much, but the reason China is gaining this enormous influence over the continent is because the Chinese government no longer has to force this phenomenon. Private Chinese industry is taking hold of Africa. Of the estimated 10,000 Chinese businesses in Africa, 90% of them are privately owned rather than one of the numerous Chinese state-run companies. The Chinese companies in Africa are actually making money, some substantially so. The Chinese government certainly has provided a considerable push to the industrialization of Africa, but now that that's done, economic forces are pushing the initiative further forward. Chinese small business is gripping the continent. Much of the Western world is ignoring the prospects of the continent, ignoring that business in Africa can now be as profitable as business in China was when its period of tremendous growth began. Right now, Africa is establishing itself as the source of labor and resources for China, and so, until the West pays attention, Africa will continue inching forward on its path towards becoming China's China. One of the techniques used to predict the GDP or GDP growth of a country, which is of course used to decide which country to invest in, is machine learning. For example, here's what a machine learning model predicted a country's GDP would be over 3 months, and here's what it actually was. It forecasted the country's GDP far better than humans did. The science behind predictions like this is complex but fascinating. If you want to learn how it works, though, the best place to do so is brilliant.org. Their machine learning course makes this advanced concept.
Sorry. This is they're now upselling. So go to this other video.
Go to other video?
Yeah. So it's not relevant. So the point here is basically what China has been doing is they are investing in Africa, no strings attached, different from the West, who also have they attach moral strings to their investment. They're saying, okay, you're not very credible, but we're nonetheless we are prepared to give you a loan at very reduced rates as long as you do not commit any crimes against humanity and whatever. But China doesn't do that. There are no moral strings attached. Basically, they respect whatever you are doing in that country, and that's fine. But it's implied that you vote with China
Okay.
in the UN. What you also see, what's very important, is that actually the initial push into Africa created an infrastructure that allows private interests into China. And now they are actually doing that on a large scale. So the initial push by the Chinese government is now followed by a private push into Africa. So they created the infrastructure that will help companies like Huawei and others into developing their business interest into Africa, which is could be very well. It probably is very valuable in the future. First as business process outsourcing, but then if we can expect a middle class to emerge from Africa, which will be able to purchase goods, and that will create more opportunities for China to do business and use it as a consumer market. So China has been very strategically and also understandably been pushing into Africa, probably because they understood, like nobody else, based on their most recent experience, that they came from a situation that was, well, more or less comparable to what China is going through now, and they have moved in smartly, whereas European and Americans have basically missed out. And Japanese as well.
Why the China is trying to make lots of money invest into Africa?
Well, what they're saying is that on a grander scheme of things, it's not that much. So they didn't invest that huge amount of money. Still, it's 2.5 times more. But what China did is that actually they saw that there are a number of interests there. The interest is political, so they can extend their sphere of influence by investing into those countries. Then there is the need for natural resources in China that could be fed from Africa, so that's another interest. Then there is the infrastructure into China and tapping into the future where Africa will become more and more important because they have a growing population, they have an uneducated population. So what China has been doing in the past 2-3 decades, that's something that a role that's going to be replaced by Africa. And China can tap into that because they already have the infrastructure into Africa, where the West has been ignoring it, where the West has been imposing all kinds of moral restrictions upon loans and of help, and trying to still have this colonial, paternalistic attitude towards African countries. China has been more pragmatic and saying, okay, so if you need the money, then okay, you have an interest. We also have an interest, but that was on basically on equal footing. So they were not like talking down to Africa. They basically say, okay, so the way you do business is the way you do business, but if you want to develop your country, we are there to support you.
Right.
So where is Japan in all this?
But how come Japan decided to make lots of money investing into Africa?
I think they're very late to the game. Very, very late to the game.
Yeah. So why?
I think that maybe they feel like, oh, we cannot miss out, because now they are really trying to play catch up now. So we have this annual Africa conference that always took place in Yokohama, but this year I believe that for the first time it took place in Tokyo. So it's been like upgraded, and the amount of money that's being pledged towards African development projects is significantly increased. So Japan is finally waking up. But I think to be honest with you. I think this is a general attitude that Japan is taking very often. They not necessarily want to be the first one, so they wanna observe and see, okay, so is this going to help? And maybe they thought investing in Africa was just too risky, so they just waited and waited. But at this moment, it seems like the bet is becoming safer and safer. But China has beaten them, and they already created inroads into Africa way before the Japanese did, and Europeans and Americans, they basically ignored Africa for too long. We actually looked at Africa as the failed continent.
That's right.
Right. So on our television programs, the only thing that we saw about Africa was conflict, hunger, misery. But the reality, if you go to Africa, the large parts of Africa, then it's much more stable than you would expect. It's much greener. There's much more potential. But yeah, also like this is really. I don't watch television. But I did watch television for a number of years in Japan. But when do you see Africa on television?
Yes, very few.
Never. Never. No interest.
No, yeah.
It's not on the radar here.
No.
BBC has many programs about Africa.
Right. CCTV probably
Yeah.
has programs about Africa. So it's a Urusan needs a hen.
Oh, got tired.
Sleepy.
It's too early for the second coffee, or shall I get some coffee for you?
Yeah, one more 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Drink course.
Oh.
Oh. Recently, I'm working hard for programming.
So that doesn't make you sleepy?
No.
No.
Stay up late.
Mm.
Wake up at early this morning, 5.
Mm. 5. So that's right now.
Not dry. But sleepy.
But sleepy.
Yeah. What time do you go to bed?
Last night,
Mm.
10:30.
Okay. Oh, that's
Not okay. I need 8 hours.
ah. So if I have 6, I'm okay, but I prefer to have 7.
8.
Actually, I think if you need 8, then you better get 8, because if you have less, then your productivity is, and especially with programming, it's very important that you can be concentrated.
I tell you, every day, 3 o'clock, just 10 minutes nap.
Power nap.
Take rest.
Do you work here? Do you study here or at home?
Yes, yes, yeah. Afternoon, start here.
Oh.
And every day, 3 o'clock, lost mind. 10 minutes, 20 minutes.
Oh, you sleep here?
Yeah.
It's in your chair.
Not sleep, lost mind.
Oh.
Lost mind. And that means a micro sleep.
Yeah, that's
Just like this.
okay. Go ahead. Mm.
これはレポピタンじゃないでしょ。
No,
Looks like,
cheaper one.
but it's called
Same.
D.
Same, but
Same
cheaper.
category.
So
Same, but cheaper.
rich mean D.
Rich mean D.
So
Yeah, but
レポピタン D.
Yeah.
same contents, but
Rich mean.
cheaper one. Not famous.
Same contents.
Yeah, the
Are you
same.
sure?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a small company,
Hmm.
but it's the same content.
And also, where do you buy it?
This one?
This one.
Yeah, from here.
On your phone here. Oh.
So we have been ignoring Africa, outside of China. I think a lot of Europeans, a lot of Americans, they basically gave up on Africa and thought, okay, well, we will come back by the time they start to develop. But other than that, it's just a bottomless pit where there is no hope that we can do any business there. So the only way that the only thing that we are doing, the only way that we are involved is in humanitarian aid. There's no business interest there, and there's no business interest there. You know, it was really a matter of donor versus recipient, and Africans hated that. Obviously, felt humiliated. First, they were colonialized, and then after colonization ended, they did not re-establish their economies very quickly, and actually this kind of aid was humiliating. And then China steps in, gives them the opportunity with no strings attached, basically, to get money and develop an infrastructure that they so desperately need. But what is interesting is that actually that now the private interest is stepping in and doing that successfully on a large scale. And if you go to Africa, what you see is that actually also historically, when I was there 25 years ago, already the Chinese were there, and the Indians. Chinese were there, but like small business, not like large scale Huawei or whatever, but
not for infrastructure.
No, just shopkeepers. Who were forming kind of like together with the Indians, the Chinese were forming the middle class in Africa. So you had the upper class were the white people, then the middle class were the Chinese and the Indians, and then the lower class were the Africans. But the Chinese infrastructure is already there, so that made inroads much easier. I don't think many Japanese people were there, living there.
Oh, Chinese all over the world, except India.
Except India, yes, that's right.
I don't know why not India, but except India. The Chinese go everywhere. I don't know, they are spread all over the world. Only India, they don't, no Chinese in India.
Well, it's, I don't know, they have not been very good friends. But actually, so the same is true for the Vietnamese.
Yeah, but I don't know. But Africa is the same. Every country, Chinatown.
Right.
And the Chinese indigenous people, 600 years ago, they tripped to China. Many 350 ships tour. Adventure tour.
But they don't feel too good for to go to Africa.
Tinghua group, 350 ships and 70,000 people going to Africa.
Tinghua group?
Tinghua. 600 years ago. 35,000 people. 350 ships going to Africa.
Yes, I know. Near the Madagascar.
Yeah, Madagascar and also the coastal area.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but why they went there? I don't know. Big ship.
And they went there to settle.
Yeah, settle. Well, of course, there are many people going back to China, but some people settle. I don't know why but the Chinese people, they like go overseas. So still they want to do something.
Which is kind of strange because what I understood from history is that actually China considers itself to be the chosen country where that's like in Western we would say it's like heaven. This is where the spirits, the gods live.
Oh, this is different. European people are looking for some Columbus, try to find new world. Chinese people different. I don't know. They're going moving around all over the world. How come?
Yeah, why are they venturing and not with a big? I mean, they didn't go out there. I think with a big geopolitical idea. It was more just to go there and live there and to make a living.
I don't understand. We don't have the kind of culture.
So, like if you go to Netherlands, every village has a Chinese restaurant. Every little village.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's really like that. Even if there's nothing there, only an ATM, a church, and a Chinese restaurant. It's like everywhere there's a Chinese restaurant.
That food is localized Dutch?
Yes. Yes. It's actually a crossover between Chinese and Indonesian food.
Indonesia. A hybrid.
Right. It's a hybrid food. But it's very, like, everybody, like Sunday at 7 o'clock there is the national soccer competition is on television. So every guy wants to be home and watch television. But like 50% of the food is usually takeout because the wife doesn't want to cook. So 50% is potato fry, 50% is Chinese.
Wow.
So it's usually what is going to be Chinese or potato fry.
Chinese living in the Dutch. They are all Protestants.
No.
Oh no.
No. Well, actually, this is also why I really respect them because they are somehow keep their kind of cultural identity. They are not really becoming like super Dutch, and they live in really small areas. So they don't have a lot. They don't seem to have developed a lot of connections within the area, but they run the Chinese restaurant, and they do that. Usually, it's a family business. So their kids and their grandmother and their cousins, they come from China, and they run the restaurant. But that's it. So that's how they make their money. And but so it's not like there's a very very tight knit group of the Chinese. At least not that I can see. So they all live like autonomous, like in these little villages, without a really close network or something. They just
it's
isolated.
In Dutch country, I heard Dutch has a multicultural nation country.
Right.
But Chinese living in the Dutch, I think that's not have a multinational concept.
They are kind of unique in a way that as immigrants they're very successful. So there are very few people who need to rely on public support because they are quite successful in making money. So they open a restaurant, they can make a living for themselves and for their families. So correspondingly, there's very little problems with crime and with other problems in relation to Chinese. They don't really have any extremist agenda or what have you. So basically, Chinese are doing quite well in Dutch society. They don't operate in big groups. So well, it's okay. Usually people don't bother to connect so much with the Chinese. But yeah, so hello, because they see them every Sunday in the before the soccer games. But yeah, I mean, imagine that you come from China, you go to a Tondumanai Kuni, in a Tondumanai rural area, and you're opening a restaurant. That's where you're going to live the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Well, how many people would do that?
I think Chinese living in the Dutch, they already had their own school for the Chinese school, isn't it?
No.
No.
They go to Dutch schools.
Wow.
Yeah. They go to Dutch schools.
No.
I'm not
They
aware.
could speak the Dutch.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, or the kids, the kids who are the elder generation have problems, but they need to survive, so they need to be able. So it's kind of famous in the hot zone, the Chinese hot zone. If you go to Chinese restaurant, Leistobah?
Yes, great. Yes. I got it.
So they speak like 4 sentences for whatever they want to that they need in order to sell their goods, but not much more.
Not much more.
But that's enough.
So I think that Chinese people they don't worry about going to Africa. Japanese people they don't want to live in Africa. Okay, just they're going to stay for business 2 or 3 years, but this only large company send them to stay worldwide. But the Chinese people they live there. So this is different.
Yeah. They seem rather comfortable and not so much scared to be out by themselves, surrounded by local people, and just worrying about making a living.
So if you're going to Africa, you can find out Chinese restaurant everywhere.
Yeah.
So we can find out the Japanese restaurant everywhere in Africa, only big city.
Yeah.
Well, Japanese don't want to go abroad for living.
They don't want to go abroad, period.
Right. But 100 years ago, many people go overseas because of the farmers cannot live up within Japan, so Japanese government sends them to South Africa, South America,
Right.
many other places, but not
But
easy.
even if they are, Japanese people are overseas, they still look for support for their own community, their own Japanese community.
Right.
Chinese people seem to do that much less.
Independent.
More independent, more comfortable in being surrounded by people who do not share the same cultural background. Well, we are here to make money. That's what we're doing. We're here to survive. Yeah.
Strong mentality.
Yeah. Very strong mentality.
So currently China making investment because before that many people, more than 1 million Chinese live in Africa. So they try to make investment of railways and more easier than the other countries. They can make communication
Yeah,
with.
they make the transaction very easy.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
They can get information from them, from Chinese living in Africa, right? So Japanese decided to make investment in Africa. It's not easy, and they don't know where to connect, where to communicate. No local society to communicate with. And China is everywhere. They have Chinese residents in every African country. So they can communicate with local people,
They have a bridgehead.
right? Japanese people. So I'm not sure how come Japanese government decided to make investment in Africa. Of course, they focus on
Well,
some
I mean,
area.
it is very, very clear for Japan, given their demographic situation, that they need to get out of Japan in order to keep to have the opportunity to grow and to support their businesses. So going out of Japan, okay, so then where are you going? And what is, if you look, very simple, if you look at demographic circumstances, where is the area with most potential? It's Africa. So I suspect that's it, but not much more. But how exactly we are going to make the next step, where what I found very interesting is that, okay, for China it makes a lot of sense to do this, and actually they just make the first step and then the rest follows. I'm not so sure whether a lot of Japanese businesses are also capable of really setting up a business and starting to make a profit over there.
Yeah, exactly. It's very skeptical. Okay, let's break. Just stop here.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Kimoto-san,
Mhm.
would you like a coffee?
I love coffee.
Oh,
Uno-san, would you like a coffee?
yeah, please. Okay. Still I'm sleepy.
What do you want? This looks very interesting.
Takahashi is still there?
ちょっと昼寝ないと思う。
うん。
昼寝?
うん。
What is this?
What is this, Uno-san? これ。
So my son came back to Japan from US. This is souvenir for me. Just I don't know what I decided to not eat just nuts.